My name is Taylor Sorensen. I'm the interim county attorney, running to be elected as county attorney. 190 years ago, this August, Abraham Lincoln, the founder of our party, and might I add a fellow attorney, he won his first election to the Illinois State House at the tender age of 25. Like Lincoln all those years ago, this is the first time I've run for any elected office. Let me tell you why. In 1859, my thrice great-grandfather, Nikolai Sorensen, arrived in this valley from Denmark to found and settle Mendon, Utah. He and his children and his grandchildren, my ancestors, along with many of yours, built this county, and they left us a legacy of freedom and self-government. My family roots run deep in this place. I married my wife in the Logan Temple. I went to the University of Utah for law school. After some time in private practice, I joined the county as a civil deputy. I was hired by John Luthi in 2021 to work and live closer to family and pursue my passion for public service. When I was hired, it was for the express purpose of bringing the county into compliance with state code and increasing the accountability and transparency of our local government. Unbeknownst to me, when I was hired, negative audits exposing misbehavior of a previous county attorney, the finance department, and other areas were about to erupt into public view. For the past 2.5 years, I have been working to solve those problems generated by those former elected officials. It's been an uphill battle at times. I'm very familiar with the circumstances of these cases, and I will ensure that those who abuse public trust will be punished to the full extent of the law. I'm committed to fairness and transparency. In the words of John Adams, thanks to God that he gave me stubbornness when I know I'm right. Just ask my wife. In the short time since my appointment as interim county attorney, I have already charged a former clerk's office employee for forgery to the lieutenant governor's office. We're investigating a report of voter fraud. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. The only way to deal with these kinds of problems is honesty. Hiding and ignoring problems only lets them grow. It takes courage to look at problems in the cold light of day, but it's the right thing to do. Over my time in the county, I've built effective working relationships with our county employees, law enforcement, elected officials through the county, and elected officials in the towns and in the cities. Together, we've tackled noncompliance to county code and state code, and we've wrestled with dozens of reforms to county policies and ordinances to restore transparency and accountability. And we've carved out a culture of zeal in public service. When Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence at the age of 33, his age did not compromise his vision. My vision for the county attorney's office is one of action. During my time as a civil deputy in the county, I was able to prevent the loss of over $1 million of grant funding over 2 years by drafting changes to county policy and working with the council to get it passed on a tight deadline. When confronted with a problem, I didn't panic, I didn't lash out, I acted. Just a few weeks ago, our office was able to cooperate with North Park Police in tracking down and extraditing a pedophile from Pennsylvania who is trying to extort 2 young girls here in North Logan. Pennsylvania courts and prosecutors, they were going to let him go. We extradited him, and we will try him in Utah for his crimes. I didn't just hope things would work out. I acted. When Alexander Hamilton wrote the Federalist Papers at the age of 32, he knew who he was, and he knew what he stood for. I'm a husband to Kiara, who's been the Abigail to my John Adams through this election process. I'm a father to Calvin and Lucy, who I'm trying to preserve this community for. I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ, whose teachings direct me how to live. I'm a conservative because I believe in limited constitutional government, local government, where individual rights are respected and the righteous traditions of our fathers are honored. What makes a good leader, a good elected official, is character, integrity, vision, and action. It takes time to restore trust, but trust can only be regained with honesty. I will serve with integrity. I will hold the government accountable. The county attorney has a unique role. I don't represent the council. I don't represent the executive. I represent you. I represent the county as an entity. It's my job to make sure that the government follows the law. I've already taken an oath as the interim county attorney to do so, and I will hold to my oath. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Cameron Cox, and I'm also running for Cache County Attorney. I'm going some people stand up. If you're a veteran, active, or past duty, please stand up. Standing. If you're a first responder, please stand up. I see a couple of you here. Some of my parents keep standing. If you're a resident of Cache County and a citizen here, please stand up. Thank you. You're the reason why I'm running for Cache County Attorney. All of you that are standing. I'm not running to be Cache County Attorney to serve the politicians that sit at this dais. I'm running to you're the reason you're the people I'm serve. As stated on my page, and as I've stated throughout my campaign, I'm not taking private donations. I'm funding this myself, so that way the rule of law and my conservative beliefs will be the only person I owe allegiances to. I won't owe allegiances to any group or any set of people. And I need 3 more people to stand up who are the most important people in my life. Jefferson, Remington, and my wife, Heather. They're in the back. Jefferson is the First Amendment, Remington's the Second Amendment. That's how important our Constitution is to me. And thank you all for being here, for being residents, long-term, short-term residents of this county. You're the reason why my wife and I chose to move here almost 2 years ago from Texas. As many of you, all of you know, our president has pretty much destroyed a lot of what I love about my former state of Texas. And about 4 years ago, my wife and I started researching, saving money, and trying to find where our forever community was going to be. A lot of people try and find their forever home, but we tried to find our forever community. And after 4 trips to Utah, we ended up in Smithfield, and we couldn't be more thankful. So thank you to each of you for making this place what it is. And I promise you, I will stick to the values that makes this community great, and I will stick up for each of you individuals in this valley. Thank you. I got one more. So, a little bit about my experience. I want to go back to 2014. That's one of the biggest years for me professionally and personally. That was 10 years ago. I was recognized by the Texas State Senate, Jane Nelson, who's now the Secretary of State for Texas, for being 3 times in a row the best civil attorney for my county of Denton County. I was also recognized by the state House for being elected the chair of the Texas Young Lawyers Association, which is the 3rd largest organization in the state of Texas, overseeing 33,000 lawyers. I was elected by my peers, but most importantly, in 2014, I married my wife. So 2014 was a great year. Thank you, love. And thanks for having this journey together with our boys. And I'll get more into my experience once we have questions, but I have almost a decade experience as being a school district attorney, city attorney, and a prosecutor. And I have almost a decade experience of being a civil service commissioner and a condemnation commissioner, overseeing the firings of our county, both with county employees and sheriff's department employees, as well as all the condemnations in one of the fastest growing counties in the United States. I have a simple rule for growth. There's smart growth, there's dumb growth. Smart growth follows zoning, infrastructure, needs, and the characteristics of the community. Dumb zoning doesn't follow one or any of those. Thank you for being here.
I do have a couple of questions for each of you. Would you please describe what programs and policies you would implement as county attorney to reduce our crime and increase our public safety?
Public safety is a priority for me, and in the county attorney's office, we have a proven track record of aggressive prosecution. Crime is like it's a quality of life issue. If your house is broken into or anyone on your block, it affects the way you live. It creates fear, it
victimized by crime, it affects the way you live. It affects the way we raise our kids. County is a special place. It's a jewel. You come in through Wellsville Canyon, through Sardine, especially now, springtime, when it's nice and green. You look at this county and you know that this is a special place. The people here are kind. The people here are good.
There are people who want to experiment with how we enforce crime in this county. In other jurisdictions, just like I talked about, Pennsylvania, California, they want to let criminals walk. They don't consider that victims are the primary concern here, that we need to make sure our victims see that those who abuse them, those who victimize them, see justice. We need to protect our community from people who will victimize kids, women, old folks. These special victims, the reason why we want to protect our special victims so much is because they are so vulnerable. The county attorney's office has a proven track record of creating a special victims unit of attorneys who are dedicated only to those types of cases so that they can receive the attention that they deserve. The county attorney's office has created a stir among the defense bar saying that we're too aggressive, that we need to tone it down. That's not my message. My message is that, if anything, we need to tone it up. We need to turn it up. We need to go after these criminals and keep our community safe. There are people who come here who they see how special it is and they see a target. We can't allow that. We need to make sure that that it's a tough place to be a criminal in Cache County and a good place to raise a family. I want to live here forever. I have deep roots in this valley. We need to keep it a special place. Keeping Cache County a special place won't come without any effort, and it won't come without sacrifice. That's why I'm passionate about being tough on crime and making sure that our public safety is one of our top priorities. Thank you.
So as a prosecutor for a number of years in Central Texas, I was also a prosecutor in Pflugerville, which is in Travis County. And when I started prosecuting there, we didn't have the border influx that we started to have at the end of my tenure. And during that time, the city of Austin had a liberal mayor be elected, Travis County had a liberal district attorney elected, and they also had a liberal sheriff get elected. And I saw firsthand the dangers that posed, and that's part of the reasons why we left. I had over 20 jury trials in Pflugerville alone in my municipal court that were handled by one immigration attorney, and she appealed every single one of those to the district attorney's office, who then dismissed every single one of those trials and those verdicts because he didn't want them to get deported. That's not enforcing the law, and that's not what I'm going to allow happen here. One. Two, before I started running, I went around and met with all of the local police departments and leadership, and a couple of the departments, there's a gap here that the county attorney's office isn't providing the resources they need. Specifically, their investigators are delegating. Once a case is transferred from the police department to the county attorney's office, the county attorney's investigators are still telling those police officers they need to go get evidence for them. My dad was a district attorney investigator for 32 years. That is our role. Once a case comes to the county attorney's office, we're going to subpoena the bank records. We're going to get the witness statements. We're going to take that burden off of our local police departments, and we're going to provide the resources that our officers need so that they can focus on the streets and not focus on getting evidence once a case is brought to our office. Thank you.
The thing that I really enjoy about interviewing attorneys is you're very thorough in all of your answers, and I can say, well done, well done. May I have questions from the audience? Let me make sure that light's still...
Okay. So, I forgot your name already?
Taylor Sorensen.
Taylor. So, Taylor, I've got two questions for you. One is, what's your background, say, from law school till today? And the other question is, it seemed like you were saying that you were going to prosecute more aggressively or include more people and prosecute more people. Could you clarify that? And because my question is, if there are people who aren't being prosecuted now, who should be, who are they? And why aren't they being prosecuted? And the question I have for both of you is, I practiced law in primarily in Utah and Salt Lake counties in the past, and I see some, I guess what I would call lack of training for the officers out in the streets who are not doing things really the way they should be done. So do either one of you have any plans for, increasing their training?
Yeah, so to address the first part of your question, when I graduated during law school, just to give you a background of what I was doing during law school, I clerked for the U.S. House of Representatives in their Oversight and Government Reform Committee under Ron DeSantis, Trey Gowdy, and Jason Chaffetz at the time. He was one of our congressmen, looking for fraud, waste, and abuse. I also spent time in the low-income tax clinic, helping people with their taxes, helping people become compliant, and I also worked part-time for the city of Park City. And after law school, I was practicing out of a firm in Park City called Ames and Ames. They have since been merged into another firm, but I was primarily working on insurance defense and civil litigation. And then I joined the county. I was hired by John Luthi in 2021, and from there I was working as a civil attorney, general counsel to our different departments. I was working primarily a lot with our development services, our public works department, and our treasurer, our recorder. I did a lot of land use work and developed those relationships. As far as what you think we can do in prosecution, and what I mean by prosecuting more efficiently and more aggressively, every case, and you're an attorney, every case is a little bit unique. And something that we do in our office is that when there's an edge case that someone's thinking about maybe dismissing, we take that case and we screen it as an office. If 2 heads are better than 1, then 13 heads are going to be better than 1. We put all of our experience to use, and we look at the case from every angle, how a defense attorney would look at it, how a prosecutor would look at it, and we look honestly of whether or not a jury would reasonably convict. And so what we do, the reason why we do that is so that we can make sure that we're not missing anything, that we're not taking cases, that we're not losing cases that, maybe someone could look at it and say, I think there's something here. I think there's something we can hook on, that we can get this victim some justice. And so by continuing that culture of making sure that we don't dismiss cases that shouldn't be dismissed, and that we're careful and we're in our evaluation, that's what I mean, that we're going to do our very best, that when those cases come in, we're going to prosecute them if there's enough evidence to do so. And as far as educating our officers, I completely agree that our office is in a special place, that we need to collaborate effectively with our local law enforcement. And something that we do is we teach at the Post Academy here at Bridgerland Tech. And we are active in getting to know our officers. We do ride-alongs. I've done ride-alongs with our police officers. I've attended their roll calls to get to know them, and so that we can build those relationships. Just last week, I was meeting with one of our officers who was discussing new tactics for interdicting drugs. He's one of our best officers for interdicting drugs, and he's developing new methods and new techniques that people in Cache County maybe haven't seen before, because criminals, they get used to the way people police. And so introducing new methods helps catch these guys who are bringing meth, bringing heroin, and killing people. They're poisoning people. So, we work closely with our law enforcement. We teach classes at Post. We rotate through with our office. And we also have a 24/7 on-call attorney. We take turns. We shift that through the office to make sure that our officers feel supported. And if they have a legal question, they can call us day or night, and someone will answer.
Thank you. So first, let me say, this is a wonderful group of officers here. Having been a city attorney in Texas and also a litigation attorney for a number of cities by the Texas Municipal League, I've represented officers in use of force cases. I was licensed in federal district court down there so I could handle those. And I also defended officers in cities in the T-Close program, which is when there's complaints against officers. And so I've seen some bad apples, and I recognize when forces have issues, and I've been friends with a lot of chiefs during that time as city attorney. And I can say definitively, we have great officers here. And I see a couple of them that I see on a weekly basis that I admire and I respect. And as a matter of fact, on the back of my business card, I'm a public defender. I only handle first-degree felonies. I don't do private work. I'm court-appointed only. But the back of my business card says, don't lie to your probation officer. It's one of the first rules. And then don't lie to your attorney. So I can say, thankfully, we have great officers here. But to answer your question, sometimes you do come across bad apples. And when I spoke with the leader of the Fraternal Order of the Police about 2 months ago, I told him, when he said, what happens when you come across an officer that's doing something wrong? I said, well, we have to look out for the integrity of the system, first and foremost. And we have to make sure whatever they did, the punishment fits the crime. And you do have to pluck bad apples from the tree every once in a while. But fortunately, the trees here are big and beautiful with a lot of good apples on them. And I'm going to have our officers' backs if elected. So thank you.
So what are your thoughts on, both of you, on the JRI laws? JRI, or as our county sheriff refers to them, just release the inmates. Are you familiar with those?
Cool, thanks. So when I first started here as a public defender, I handled all the cases in Judge Walsh's court. And first, let me say, the system for getting judges here is so much better than Texas. They're not elected. They're appointed on merit and reviewed by their peers, and I absolutely love it. So thank you. That's another thing I love about Utah. Everything is better in Utah than Texas, except for Mexican food. Sorry. And if you've never been to an H-E-B grocery store, they're also amazing. It's better than Buc-ee's, I'm telling you. So that being said, when I took over Judge Walsh's court as the public defender, most of my cases were drug cases. And so I took it on myself to make sure my number one priority in those cases is, again, making sure the punishment fits the crime, but to also relieve what's going on in the jail and some of the overflow issues there. And so therefore, I tried to get my clients released into treatment, because having a treatment-first program, which all of our judges are in favor of, which is why I love practicing in front of them, helping my clients and helping these people get into treatment is better for them, it's better for our system, they're not going to repeat as often, it's better for their families, and it's better for our community. But just to release people, I'm totally against.
Yeah, you know, working with our system, the question was how we feel about something called JRI. It's a reform of our justice system in an effort to reduce crowding in prisons. And, you know, the thing with crime is that if, you know, we have these programs, mental health court, drug court, veterans court, juvenile court, we have these what are called specialty courts. And in our office, we have great attorneys who are dedicated and they work hard to help people get into those programs when they qualify. When they don't qualify, at that point, because of the violence of their crime or their past history, you know, if they qualify, we're more than happy to get them in there. But if they don't, the requirements are a low bar. And if you don't meet those requirements, it usually means that you have a violent history. And at that point, our concern needs to shift to focus on protecting the community. Yes, we want people to succeed. Yes, we want people to live drug-free lives and be productive citizens. But you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. And so when there are individuals who are constantly reoffending and they don't qualify, then we do our very best to keep them in prison and keep them out of the community, because ultimately, our highest responsibility is to keep the public safe and to keep our victims safe. And shunting people into alternative courts that shouldn't be there, that just makes the alternative courts, these specialty courts, work worse. And it makes them not as successful. And so as far as what the Utah State Legislature decides on how to do justice reform, we have to follow the law. The county attorney's office, we have to follow the law, and we'll follow those restrictions as the Utah State Legislature sees fit. The people are the ultimate sovereign here, and so we have to do what they say through their elected representatives. But we're going to do our very best under those circumstances to keep our community safe.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, let me get the mic. Wait, let me get the mic.
I think the first one is pretty easy, I think, which is, so since the prosecutor is the lead criminal attorney for the county, how many criminal trials have each of you tried to completion? That's the first question. The second question is, what are your top 3 to 5 prosecutorial preferences or prosecutorial areas that you would emphasize? Because obviously everybody has limited resources, so you're going to have to prioritize some things over other things. And then lastly, kind of out of the criminal realm, I believe the county attorney also serves as a legal advisor to the county council. And how do you see that role working? And you emphasize you represent the county, not the council. So how do you see that relationship playing? Because coming out of the audits, that had been a challenge in the past.
I'll take this one first. Great questions. Thank you. So first, to answer your question, I've handled, in my almost 2 decades of legal career, over 1,000, sorry, thank you, over 1,000, probably maybe 1,500 or more criminal cases total. I've had I think 26 jury trials in criminal cases, and I've had roughly about the same amount in civil jury trial cases as well. And so my experience speaks for itself. I also, as the chair of Texas Young Lawyers and the board member for Texas Young Lawyers for 4 years, was in charge of our local affiliates committee. What that committee did was travel around the state of Texas and mentor young lawyers on changes in law, trial strategies, and the like. And I was the chair of that committee. And so I visited almost all 254 of our counties over 4 years. Some of them are conglomerate counties for the Young Lawyers Division, and mentored those young lawyers. And I say that, and that's important, because this county attorney's office has a lot of young lawyers, a lot of good young lawyers that need mentoring. I've seen some common mistakes like not having evidence filed and presented to us as defense attorneys in time. And so in one of my cases in November, 3 exhibits were not allowed. Those are common mistakes that can be resolved by being a good mentor. And then if we have serious cases, I have the experience, the trial experience, and the know-how to step in and be the lead attorney. I do serious felony cases as a public defender. So if there's any serious felony cases that need to be prosecuted, I will step in and take the lead role in that and not delegate that to a 2 or 3 year lawyer. I think I answered those. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, your prosecutorial priority.
Oh, yes.
And then your relationship with the council. But you can go back and forth, however you want.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you. So, so this is a unique dichotomy we have here in this office. So to prioritize the prosecution office, I want to have good mentorship, stewardship. I want our detectives to take the lead on cases from our local police departments. And I want to see us have a felony intake, seasoned felony intake attorney. We have one I have in mind that's been here for a long time that can screen the cases and make sure we have the evidence on the front end going into trial. And most importantly, so we don't have issues like I saw with evidence not being presented. But then we can also get affidavits drafted on our end for our officers so they don't have to waste back-to-back Mondays or Wednesdays at preliminary hearings. The affidavit can be filed and we cannot have them there for the preliminary hearing so they can spend more time on the streets keeping us safe. The dichotomy with the civil and the criminal side here is, just so you guys don't know, county attorney's office both puts on a civil hat for the dais up here and for the county council and for growth issues, development issues, and then also puts on the criminal hat. I've done both sides for roughly almost a decade. So I can do both of those. But what I would like to see, and where I think we can save money since we're all conservatives here, is I worked at a law firm in Austin. We were privately hired to serve as the city attorney. And our city's roughly paid $50,000 or $60,000 a year to have a whole law firm sit right here and do what we have in-house doing with 2 lawyers and a staff member, roughly $250,000, $300,000 a year. We can outsource that for a lot less, $50,000 to $75,000 a year, have an entire law firm and their experience serving county counsel, and then it precludes any conflict of interest between my office with what they need and what we need, and they have their own dedicated attorney that they can talk to and confide in an executive session.
Thank you. You know, there's different kinds of attorney. There's attorneys who are in the courtroom constantly. There's general counsel attorneys. And as I said before, you know, what I did was general civil litigation, so most of my experience was in the civil realm prior. And, you know, so as far as criminal law, I have not tried any criminal cases, but just like the previous county attorney who was just elected, John Luthi, he had never tried a criminal case either. And so my focus has been on the general counsel for the county and making sure that our county runs efficiently. Now, we have a bank of really excellent attorneys, excellent young attorneys who, I might add, beat the public defenders and the defenders in this valley routinely. And the attorneys that we have in our office, they are seasoned. They have dozens of trials that they are extremely successful at. And like I said, you know, we don't need just one dedicated attorney who's going to screen things. We screen things all together as an office. We put together not just 20 years, we put together 80 years of combined experience to make sure that we're not missing anything. Now, you know, as it concerns, you know, something that you can't, what Mr. Cox just said, that you cannot just do a preliminary statement. You can't just have the police officers file an affidavit. That's against state code. I know that because I'm from Utah. I've studied state code. I know that that's the rule. That you can't do that. We have to have our officers there. That's what the state legislature wants us to do. And so we can't, the county attorney must follow the law. It must follow the state code. Regardless of what our personal preferences are, the county attorney must follow state code. Now, as far as advising the council, what I said was the county attorney does what's in the best interest of the county as an entity. That means protecting the county if there's a rogue council member, a rogue executive, protecting the county from creating litigation for itself and forcing the county to have to pay out money in the taxpayer's money in a lawsuit. Now, there are great benefits to having in-house counsel. You look at every large company, they have in-house counsel. And the reason why is because you want someone who is familiar with that organization, who works with that organization on a daily basis. Outsourcing that to a different law firm who has divided loyalties, they're trying to do all the other things they need to do, they're trying to please their boss, they're trying to bill on their other cases, the county is going to be low priority. By having someone in the county who works for the county, their only focus is the county, you get the benefit of their experience, you get the benefit of all of their time. I'm a salaried employee. The other civil attorneys in this county are salaried employees. Their only job is to work for the county. That's also why we made that change so that the county attorney is now going to be a district attorney. So the county attorney will only devote his energy and time to the county. That's what the county deserves. The county deserves that special hands-on treatment. It doesn't deserve to outsource it and phone it in. The county deserves someone who's there full-time, focusing on the issues of the county. Phoning it in is what got us to where we are now, where the county has had problems. The county attorney and the civil deputies, I was one of the first full-time civil deputies hired by the county, which is crazy. In an organization of 400 people, and all the problems that come with just having that many employees total, not to mention all the interactions we have with police, interactions we have with the municipalities, the county needs dedicated, salaried employees who are focused just on the county's issues, not phoning it in.
Okay, I'd like both attorneys to answer this question. I worked for the county for 24 years. Very proud of the service I gave the county, and I'd still be here today if it wasn't for a couple of different things. I had a daughter held at gunpoint, and the case was prosecuted by the county attorney's office. She became suicidal and everything like that, and we dealt with a lot of things with this child. We asked the county attorney at the time to work with the defense counsel to do a plea in abeyance. The county attorney, and I know for a fact, had a personal issue against the defendant, and he refused a plea in abeyance. And a plea in abeyance is just they plead guilty and their sentence is held in abeyance. They get counseling and everything. It went to a full jury trial, and because of where I worked, my daughter was called a liar by the defense counsel because mom was coaching her. I was a single mom, couldn't talk to my daughter about how she was feeling because of the coaching aspect. And like I said, she became suicidal. So number one, how would you guys mitigate something like that? Because even the prosecutor that prosecuted, he was willing to do that, but the county attorney at the time refused that. And then number two, like I said, I worked for the county 24 years, loved my job, loved what I was doing, loved everything about it. I was at the county council meeting last night and was very, very concerned with some of the things that I heard, because the reason I left the county is I went through abuse by my boss, bullied, threatened with criminal prosecution. I never knew if I was going to have a job day by day because I didn't know who I was getting when I came to work. And coming to the county council put me back into major PTSD last night, hearing about threats that could be texts that could be considered threats. And number one, how are you going to prevent bullying by county officials, by elected officials to county employees, number one? And what happens if criminal charges are filed and against the threats and the intimidation tactics?
Victims' rights are a priority for our office. We have one of the best victims advocates programs in the entire state that we've been running for over 30 years, close to 30 years. That, you know, and I heard a case just this past week of a victim who, you know, there was a perpetrator who was obviously guilty, and for her own personal reasons, she didn't want to move forward with that prosecution. And what we decided to do is we screened it through multiple attorneys. We put our heads together, and, you know, the different attorneys that worked on it were Griffin Hazard, you might know him, Aaron Jossie. I looked at it. Ronnie Keller looked at it. We put together our over 25 years of combined experience, and we looked at it, and we came to the conclusion that without our victim and without her say-so, if she's not willing to move forward, then we need to put this on pause, and we need to wait until she's ready. Our victims, they've already gone through one of the worst things in their life. Going through the justice system can make it even worse. Our goal is to make sure that that doesn't happen. It's to make sure that they have healing, that they can move forward in a healthy way. Now, as it concerns what the environment of the office should be, our office needs to have a model based on respect. Our office needs to have a model based on mutual understanding. Screaming, intimidation, that has no place in the workplace, let alone in a place where we're supposed to be administering justice. It is extremely important to me that we treat each other with kindness, that the golden rule applies. My dad's standing right there, and he always says, you know, treat people how you would like to be treated. Would you like to be screamed at by your boss? No. Then if you're the boss, don't scream at people. That's kindergarten rules. You know, some of the most important things you learn in kindergarten. My wife is a teacher. My sister was a teacher. My mother-in-law was a teacher. And playing nice with others, sharing your toys, those aren't just things in the classroom. Those are things in the workplace. We need to learn to work well together and respect each other, treat each other with civility. It's actually a rule many of you might not know this, the attorneys are required by the Utah Bar to follow rules of professionalism and civility. And when we break those rules, we're violating our oath to the Utah public and to the Utah Bar. We need to be respectful. We must be respectful, and our office won't work if we're not.
Thank you, and I'm sorry your daughter had to go through that. So for exactly 10 years, I served on my board, and for 6 years, I was an officer on my board for the Children's Advocacy Center of Denton County. At that time, we went from 600,000 to 900,000, almost 1 million people during that time. And when I left and when we moved to Austin, we were seeing about 70 to 80 kids a week, victims of sexual child abuse. And on my website, you'll notice my motto is truth, justice, and healing. And that comes from my advocacy center. Because no matter what side you're on, whether you're a public defender, defense attorney, or prosecutor, or police officer, children's advocate, child's advocate, victim's advocate, everybody's in the business of truth. What's the truth in this case? Everybody's in the business of justice, making sure the punishment fits the crime. In your case, plea in abeyance and your daughter not having to testify. Because once we get a plea agreement, plea in abeyance, or a jury trial, the healing can begin. And I'm seeing some gaps here with that motto. Specifically, at our Children's Advocacy Center, as soon as a little kid came into our facility, and they had to tell an adult, an officer, and a forensic interviewer the horror of what they've been going through, sometimes all their life, sometimes just once at a friend's house at an overnight party. But whatever it is, it's an adult situation and it's horrific for them. So our motto was to make sure those kids got healing and therapy that day. And we raised private funds every year. My wife and I help do that every year. So that way those kids could get treatment there for the rest of their lives for free. And we still had adults come back and get treatment and be mentors to those kids and tell their stories to those kids so those kids didn't feel alone. And so that's my motto moving into this office is truth, justice, and healing. And I see gaps. Before I met with all the police officers around the county, or at least their leadership, there's so many I couldn't meet with all of them, of course, I went and toured our Children's Justice Center. And I saw a lot. I'd already heard that there was a lot of wasteful spending over there. I'd already heard it cost roughly $3.4 million for that building, and it was supposed to cost $1 million. And then I saw as I toured that they had like a $10,000 refrigerator, like a huge Thermador refrigerator, double ovens, like high-end appliances. And I was like, our Children's Advocacy Center didn't have but a microwave and a mini fridge, and we were there focused on the kids, teddy bears, and treatment. And I asked, do you guys not provide therapy? Because one of my very first cases here 2 years ago, the little girl that was a victim, I was told was on a wait list for 30 to 45 days before she could get private treatment at a therapist here in town. And they said that's not their model. I want to help change that. I believe those kids should be getting treatment for free that day. They have empty rooms there, and I've seen a lot of money wasted over there that we could have used to help get those kids therapists. And not only that, but we were in a college town, University of North Texas and Texas Women's University, and there's master's students that need hours and therapy services that we plugged, that we could pay minimum wage so they could earn their hours and provide the therapy for these kids, including group therapy. We got a wonderful university right here that does the same thing. We can plug that resource to help these kids get the treatment and therapy that they need.
Thank you very much.
I have a question on where each one of you stand with pedophiles, whether it's a first time, hopefully not a second offender, but what do you feel would be justice towards the victim, and what do you think is justified for a pedophile?
Thank you. So I also have some real world examples about this. That's predominantly handling the first degree felonies in this county I represent. Those are my clients currently. And I take a justice first and a victim first approach. And those don't argue with each other. They work well together. For the same reason that she just said her daughter didn't want to testify, we don't need to put these little kids on the stand. And so I work adamantly to try and get plea agreements done So that way they go serve the prison time that they need to, but that these little kids don't have to testify in front of a bunch of strangers. And fortunately, I've had the pleasure of working with a couple of our prosecutors that agree with me on that. Specifically, I had 2 cases supposed to go to trial in January. Both bad cases, both dads sexually assaulted their daughters. We were supposed to have a pretrial hearing in December. We're coming up on Thanksgiving. I am emailing the prosecutor, hey, we need to get a plea agreement in place. He was in a trial, and then finally that Friday before Thanksgiving break, I said, hey, I'm sorry to hound you, but I want to get a plea agreement in place so these girls don't have to worry about this over Christmas and Thanksgiving so they can start the healing. And he got back to me on Friday after 5, and we were able to get the court coordinator for Walsh's Court to schedule a hearing before Thanksgiving on that following Monday after hours so we could get those plea agreements entered.
You know, I told you something that earlier, that our office is committed to bringing these people to justice. We helped a detective from North Park. We helped collaborate with Pennsylvania to fly him out there and bring this pedophile back to Utah so he could face justice. I don't think there's enough we can do. We will prosecute these people to the fullest extent of the law. It's our job, it's the prosecutor's job to make sure that, you know, the system that we have in our justice system is an adversarial system, which means that puts the prosecutor against the defender, and that somewhere in the middle they're going to find the truth. It's our job to prosecute as vigorously as we can. It's our job to make sure that those who prey on little kids or who look at little kids who are victims of abuse from across the world, that these people face justice, that they are told and they are shown that that is not okay and it never will be okay. We have to protect our kids. There's a young girl who was abducted from North Park. She was human trafficked down to Salt Lake. This happened just in January in our county, in our towns. Someone was being human trafficked, a young girl was being human trafficked down to Salt Lake, and then he took her out to Oregon. And he was already telling her that she needed to cook drugs. He was going to pimp her out. He was going to use her as a tool to make money, and he was sexually abusing her the entire way. We're bringing that person back to Utah to face justice. We talked to the AG and they said, oh, this is, you know, I don't think this is something that we really want to take. The FBI said, well, this isn't sexy enough for us. She didn't die. And we said, that's unacceptable. We are going to merge these cases and we're going to take it here in North Logan. We're going to prosecute it here in the county because that is what we're all about. These people must face justice. They cannot use the system to protect themselves. That's just my philosophy, is we have to bring these people to justice. And, you know, we have a great Children's Justice Center. Our kids deserve the best. When they're brought there, you know, there are parents who, you know, we have a fridge so they can have a Diet Coke while their kid gets interviewed. You know, our kids deserve the best. They deserve a place that's safe, it's clean, it looks nice, and, you know, these kids, they deserve the best. And when they get their forensic interview, it's recorded so that they don't have to do it over and over again, so that they can be interviewed once, one and done. And that interview is recorded, and then that can be entered into the evidence so that the kid can move on with their lives. And all of this stuff can go on in the background, they can put it behind them. So if there's anything that I can say, it's that we can't do enough to protect these kids. And, you know, the county attorney's office, we also work on education, helping kids learn how to keep themselves safe. Both of these girls who were trafficked or who were being extorted, they came into contact with these people online in chat rooms because they're young, they're inexperienced, and that's what these people are waiting for them.
Before I ask the next question, just touching base with you guys, we were going to start this a little bit later. We started a half an hour early. Our county clerk only had, not for mine. Our county clerk, we only had one candidate. Our time's a little bit off. You've already committed to 45 minutes. Is it okay if I keep going?
Yeah.
Are you
Great questions. You bet.
All right. Any more questions?
So I watched that county council meeting from last night, and I was appalled. It's easy to go up and say all the right words, but when you harass someone who has done so much for our county who goes out and gets grants to get those things. It doesn't come out of taxpayer money. That fridge, I would bet, came out of a grant and not out of taxpayer money.
You know where grants come from? They're taxpayer money. They could be spent for therapy services for these children and not fridges and massage chairs.
You know, sometimes when a mom or an aunt or a grandma brings these kids to be interviewed, they want something to drink. And they haven't had a massage probably in years. And so taking a donated massage chair so that some poor mom who's been dealing with her kid being abused, sexually assaulted, is it too much to ask that while her child is disclosing some of the worst things that can happen to a person, that person whose child is going through that, and I'm sure most of you have kids. You know, my daughter, when she was born, she was in the NICU for 52 days. And watching your kid go through something is worse than if you go through something. I would rather go through the hospital for 52 days than watch one of my kids do it. And most parents, I'm sure, would feel the same. Watching your kid go through something like that and being offered the chance to relax for a moment, have a cold drink, I don't think that's too much for our kids. I think our kids deserve the best.
And one more thing, you may have noticed at the end of the second February council meeting, that building that's almost triple its budget isn't even ADA compliant. I noticed that my first trip there. So kids with disabilities have to be pulled upstairs or downstairs to get in. They put a buffet ramp in the back, but it doesn't meet ADA compliancy standards. It's not wide enough. So that's also an issue. And any government building should be ADA compliant, especially if they spent $3.4 million on it. They asked for $100,000. It's also important to note in that same meeting, Mr. Zook and his budget person were asking for $16,000 to make the auditor's office and to build the auditor's office, and the county council was asking for bids and quotes. But when the CJC got up and asked for a $100,000 blanket check to make that building ADA compliant, no questions, no bids, rubber stamped it. Why isn't it ADA compliant? Not one question was asked about that. That's serious issues.
I want to come back to, though, the threatening emails to the staff. It's concerning to me. I worked in an office with a hostile elected official, and it was miserable. And so it bothers me that there are these emails or texts that are being sent to staff. I would be nervous if I worked in that office.
I passed out packets that explain all of that. I included in actually all the text that you're referring to. I think I have some extras up here. I'll let the 54 pages speak for themselves.
I think you missed one. The February 14th text. Is that on there?
It should be. Kinko's just did it today, so.
I have it.
Yeah, totally.
So, and if I could speak to, the CJC's building, Terrell Warner was the first person to raise that issue, that the building was way over budget. She raised the issue that the procurement process wasn't followed because we had a county attorney who was a loose cannon, who was making illegal decisions. And Terrell Warner was the first person to blow the whistle, and this was all dealt with and put before the public close to 2 years ago. And so this isn't raising anything new. This is raising old issues that Terrell Warner herself was the one who brought up in the first place. And you're completely right that having a county where elected officials are a negative influence, where our public servants, who are career public servants, are being driven out of their jobs because of a hostile work environment, that, number one, it creates, again, I'm a civil attorney. What I see there is a massive liability risk. You have people who can sue the county, who can sue and win and take taxpayer dollars away from the county that would otherwise be used for good purposes. Instead, they're being used to pay out complaints that are harassment. And so if we have elected officials who are creating problems, that's a massive liability problem for the county. And not only that, it's a massive operational problem for the county because you have no continuity, you have no experience in the office, experienced civil servants leave, and then you have a situation where you can't even do the basic functions of government because of this hostile work environment. And it's a vicious cycle that we have to avoid.
May I just add one bit to that? So I'm not trying to create a hostile work environment. I'm trying to create an environment of fiscal oversight, which we've lacked for years.
You've asked a question. Let me get one more. Can you help me pass this back, please?
I just want to speak briefly about the Children's Justice Center. And it was built before my time on the county council, but I was there when Terrell came and talked about some of the issues that they had. Basically, her idea was to take an old home and remodel it, and she had some specific ideas that could be done pretty inexpensively. And that contract was taken out of her hands. And she repeatedly tried to give her opinion about, we don't need glass walls, we don't need designer furniture, we don't need those things. And her voice wasn't listened to. So the things that, maybe there is a $10,000 fridge, I guarantee you Terrell Warner didn't decide that. That there are many things in that building, including the lack of parking, the windows weren't done correctly, there was a lot of designer choices that were made that were not made specifically for that system that was needed, and Terrell spoke out about it several times.
Thank you. So I just have a question. I too listened to the county council meeting last night, and my question is what are your plans for de-escalating this? So where there's a packet here that seems to be escalating it, the conversation. This is my first time as a delegate, but it seems like we need to get back to work for our county. The back and forth, the who did it, who didn't do it, amongst one another. What are your plans respectively to de-escalate that? I don't think what we're seeing tonight is de-escalating that. And so how do we get back to the county's work? We work hard, we pay our taxes, but I'm not sure that those tax dollars, if this is what this is going to be, I question that. So how do we get back to work?
Wonderful. Thank you for that question. And that's a great question because that's what I've been trying to do for the last couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, I actually emailed the council on Friday asking if I could speak last night because I thought I should have a chance to at least have my voice heard on the issue. And I was told, no, I'm not allowed to speak because I'm not on the agenda. Surprise, last night they spent almost an hour about me on the agenda. So to answer your question, yes, this needs to de-escalate. Should never have gotten this far. I report to my supervisor, Mike McGinnis. We wanted to come together on a solution on this. That solution was taken out of his hands, and we weren't able to have a resolution and a productive meeting about it because they wanted to make it political and about me running for my campaign instead of trying to come to a good resolution. And that's all I want in this. I agree.
The best fire is the fire that doesn't start. And prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We need a county attorney who is level-headed. We need a county attorney who, when problems arise, they address those problems rationally. They don't lash out. And also, when things like this happen, you have to follow the policy. That's why it's important to have good county policy and good county ordinances. And what I can tell you is that I'm committed to following what the county policy is. I'm committed to following what our elected representatives, your representatives, what they said is our policy. That's what we have to follow. And so avoiding something like this in the first place, that's the best policy. That's the best practice.
I just have a statement, and I think the county, for those county council members that are here, we need to have a facilities director. I do not think that the county sheriff or the county attorney should be over building buildings. That should be a facilities thing, not an elected official.
May I address that? Is that okay? So, yes.
Let me get the mic back to you, please.
So you bring up a great point that ties into something I said earlier about having a law firm hired by the county to be the county attorney on the civil side, is because when I was at a private firm doing that for cities, we had somebody that was a civil engineer and an attorney. And so when cities like Bee Cave and Pflugerville were doing a lot of growth, building development, infrastructure development, Scott handled those cases for them and those issues for them because he was an expert attorney in that area. And our cities, like they don't have here, had facilities directors for that role that worked with Scott. So I agree with you, that is a necessity. And having that part outsourced removes conflicts of interest and allows for that to happen with lesser dollars and more efficiently.
You know, I agree. The place of the county attorney, we need to focus on the law and representing the county. It's not my place as the interim to talk about building new buildings. You know, the county council just last night was talking about how we probably ought to have a fleet manager too. We've got tons of cars and not a standardized process. That's, you know, there are a lot of things in the county that need to be improved. And having a dedicated county attorney and dedicated civil staff to root out those issues, to find those issues, become familiar with the county, I think that's the best practice.
Hi, my name's Keegan. This might be a question to test the attorney chops. I don't know how it works, but I would guess the appropriate venue for voicing a concern with potential harassment within the county probably isn't during a county council meeting. So what I'd like to know, and I think maybe sometimes our disputes result from a misunderstanding of roles or a misunderstanding of how the process should be handled. I've watched a lot of attorney shows, so I'm kind of an expert. Every show I've seen, that when the person starts to speak up, the attorney says to their client, "Shut up, there's an investigation," right? You don't comment on an investigation. Can you just explain, when there is a complaint within the county, how that is to be handled? Who receives the complaint? How are investigations handled? Who decides if it's escalated to an investigation? Do people comment during an investigation? How is an investigation closed? I think that would help us all understand the current issue at hand and how it should be handled, so then we can understand the process. Thank you.
Okay.
You know, what we have to do is we have to follow policy. And so, you know, we have a great civil attorney standing right there, Jairus Kendall. He works with our HR department. That's one of his specialties, is working through that. And so what happens is we have an Office of Personnel Management, and when someone makes a complaint, they submit that complaint, especially for this type of complaint, a complaint of harassment. They make that complaint to the Office of Personnel Management. And the Office of Personnel Management notifies that employee's direct supervisor and brings it to their attention. And my understanding is that that's what occurred, and that the Office of Personnel Management met with the direct supervisor and discussed the case, discussed the incident, the alleged incident. And our county policy states that the county attorney's office is also must be involved with that process. Now, there is a question because the alleged incident involved someone who happens to be in the public defender's office. Now, what happened was the Office of Personnel Management decided, well, it wouldn't seem very kosher if the prosecutor's office is overseeing complaint over a public defender, a contracted employee from the public defender. And so the Office of Personnel Management wanted to reach out to an independent investigator who was recommended to them by the insurer of the county. Now, that independent attorney who was going to review the case said, well, here's an agreement that describes the scope of my representation. That's something that every attorney gives to their client before they start to make sure that they understand the scope, what their relationship is and what the scope of that investigation is going to be. And my understanding is what happened last night is that agreement to have an independent investigator look at this whole matter, that agreement was not being signed. I don't know why. I can't comment on that. That's not my duty. That's why my understanding of what Tara was trying to say is she was trying to figure out why that hadn't been signed, especially when under our county policy, there's a 45-day deadline that this investigation has to happen. It must happen.
And then I want to ask you and Jairus, are you guys going to investigate what I brought up at the same time, which I have evidence of in my packet, Exhibit A and D, where my opponent and his staff is campaigning with county resources in violation of multiple county policies and procedures, and as stated in Section 8 of those policies and procedures, Amy Adams is supposed to investigate those, and she said she is not going to investigate those. That was brought up at the exact same time. That's a violation of policies and procedures. Exhibit A has all of those examples.
I can tell you that Tara Warner has already been interviewed by Amy Adams, our Director of Personnel Management. The other individual involved, Nate Argyle, he was interviewed by our Director of Personnel Management. I was interviewed by our Director of Personnel Management regarding each one of these emails. Now, if you take a look at these emails, when I was appointed as the county attorney, when you take on a new role, you have to start going to meetings. I'm kind of a professional meeting goer now. I have to attend a lot of meetings. The county attorney, the primary law enforcement official in the county, along with the sheriff, has to develop relationships with police chiefs, with sheriffs, with DCFS. The county attorney also comments on upcoming legislation and argues in favor of them. The county attorney also gets to know police officers. The county attorney also gets to know their day-to-day. And if you take a look at those emails, what that is senior staff emailing me saying, hey, Taylor, you ought to go to this meeting. This is the Cache Valley Law Enforcement Admin meeting. Every police chief's going to be there, and you need to go to that. Another one was that, hey, there's upcoming legislation coming up to make it mandatory to educate our kids on how to avoid sexual abuse. You should probably go to that. Hey, you just got invited to speak at this event, speaking in favor of this legislation. Or, hey, you should get to know our police officers. You were a civil attorney, you weren't working with them very closely. You need to go to their roll call. You should go on a ride along with them. Those are things that are just part of my job. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't do those things. And senior members of my staff letting me know that I should do those things because I'm coming in midstream. I was appointed just in January. That's just part of my job. That's not campaigning. That's just doing my job.
What about the email, hey, everybody, look at my campaign website, and people are saying, hey, I need a sign, bring me a sign.
Okay, this is going to be our last comment.
So, in state code doesn't want you to use your public email for a political purpose. There's a couple of exceptions in there. When you are responding to direct questions from people, then it's exempted. When your email stays within the entity, then it's exempted. I sent an email because members of my staff, I had filed for my candidacy just the day before, and members of my staff were asking me, Taylor, hey, do you have your website up? Hey, I'd love to see it. And I responded to their direct questions with an email in a neutral tone. Here's my website for anyone who wants to take a look. I didn't tell them to look at it. I didn't ask them to look at it. I just said informationally, here it is. It stayed within my department, and it was in response to direct questions. And under state code, it's specifically allowed under the code. And the
Is that same law firm going to investigate your issues as it's investigating mine? Because it seems like there's a conflict there.
So Jeff and I have gotten down a mastery of special elections, and we appreciate so much having delegates out here that are vetting candidates, that really look for values and things. And we really appreciate you being out here for it. And we appreciate our candidates for being here to speak and answer questions so candidly. We're going to go ahead and close now with a big thank you. You're welcome to continue to mingle. We have a little bit more time before we need to completely leave the building. Thank you very much.